Good evening and thank you for joining us. A century ago today, the war to end all wars came to a close. Millions around the world and across Canada are spending today remembering war heroes who so bravely fought for our country. Here in Thunder Bay, a number of Remembrance Day ceremonies were held as the public paid their respects to past and present soldiers. We begin our coverage at Fort William Gardens. Corey Nordstrom reports.
Last post played out for thousands at Fort William Gardens in the city's largest Remembrance Day gathering. And what a significant day it was. Veterans from all branches of the military were honored on the 100th anniversary of the official end to World War I. Ken Malenko is a veteran himself and organized the ceremony. To him, November 11th is about keeping the memory of fallen soldiers alive.
It's an important anniversary at 100 years. It's, I don't know how to overstate it or understate it, but 100 years was at the end of the war that we thought the end would end all wars. It didn't, unfortunately. So to us in the Royal Canadian Legion, the importance is the continuance of remembrance.
The fullness of the garden seats meant a lot to the veterans on hand. Marc Belanger served overseas and says seeing the community's support lets him know that his service was appreciated.
Our community showed itself today to be supportive in the memory of past service and the support of current veterans returning from new assignments and new wars and conflicts.
A part of the service was the display of John McCrae's immortal words, the traditional passing of the torch from one veteran to another. World War II vet Mo Nelson represented the elder generation and says to stand for his fellow veterans was a tremendous honor.
This is quite amazing how well this is all organized and run. And it's a great honor to all the veterans, and especially those who gave their lives for our country. I had two first cousins give their lives for our country, in my case.
Corey Nordstrom, TBT News.
Meanwhile, on the north side of the city, a large crowd gathered at Waverly Park Cenotaph. Attendees stood around proudly to honor the service and sacrifice of Canadian veterans. Alana Pickrell reports.
100 years ago, the war to end all wars came to a close, and a century later, Thunder Bay residents braved the cold, snowy weather to remember and honor veterans, past and present, who have served their country. The ceremony began with the Silver Cross mother, Carol Kaluki, laying the first wreath, followed by dozens more presented by organizations and politicians from around the city. 92-year-old local Navy veteran Roy Lamore says the turnout was everything he could have asked for.
I've never seen anything so beautiful. It's to see today that after the war we had the same type of people coming, but it's just wonderful to see the kids and the spectators. It just makes you feel so great, that they're here. And they are the ones that remembering.
Lamore adds that during the First and Second World War, so many young people lost their lives, and it is important that 100 years later, people still remember them. Robert Cutbush, the Vice President of Manitoba Northwestern Ontario Provincial Command and the Master of Ceremonies, says many veterans that did make it back still suffered physical and mental disabilities. He says even though a century has passed, remembering the war needs to continue to be passed down.
It's important that they come out to entrench themselves to remember, that November 11th, on the 11th hour, that's when we remember 2 minutes of silence. And we have to pass that down generation to generation so each successive generation knows that, conflict is not a very good thing. It affects the country.
With close to 700 people surrounding the cenotaph, Thunder Bay residents showed that November 11th is still such an important day. Retired Naval Reservist Les Newman says it's incredibly important people continue to show their support.
The number of people that were killed, well over 1 million people killed. It's something we have to keep remembering because there are none of those veterans left. So we have to remember on their behalf.
The ceremony wrapped up with a minute of silence, the playing of taps, a rifle salute, and a flyover. Alana Pickrell, TBT News.
Fort William First Nation also held a Remembrance Day ceremony at Mount McKay. The service honored veterans who served and died in Canada's defense. Hundreds gathered atop the scenic lookout to pay their respects. Members of Anishinaabe Aski Nation attended the ceremony, which has been held annually for over 20 years. The ceremony included a Ojibwe rendition of In Flanders Fields and a salute to the country's fallen soldiers. Lieutenant Colonel David Ratt says it was an emotional ceremony.
It was very touching. For me, as a person, I have family members who served in previous wars and died in previous wars. As a member of the military, I have people in my unit who have served in previous wars and have died. And I think this year, it's the Remembrance service. It has a lot of importance for people because it's the anniversary of the 100th anniversary of the end of the First World War.
Family and friends laid wreaths and pictures to honor their departed loved ones. 6 days of curling featured some of the biggest names in the sport has come to a close. The Pinty's Tour Challenge wrapped up today, but the city continues to reap the economic benefits the event has brought in. With any tournament of this magnitude, a bump in the economy is expected. Co-chair of the tournament, John Cameron, says he estimates that the event generated between $1.5 to $2 million. With the last major curling tournament in the city taking place in 2003, Cameron says they were blown away with the turnout, namely the number of fans.
We had sold-out crowds Tuesday night starting right off. It was like was packed in here, and it just continued. Even some of the morning draws where you don't expect people to come out, there was like 200, 300 people in the stands. So obviously that was good support, but 15,000 in the arena seats about 1,000, 1,100. 15,000 for the week is really good.
Cameron hopes that with the success of this tournament, Thunder Bay can attract more large sporting events in the future. Towns and cities across the province celebrated treaty recognition with a number of events this past week. The events were aimed at educating the next generation as to the critical role the treaties played in the creation of Canada. Adam Riley reports from the ceremony in Kenora.
It's a treaty that is almost as old as Canada itself. Treaty 3, which spans from the Manitoba border to just west of Thunder Bay and from the U.S.-Canadian border to just north of Sioux Lookout, is one of the more successful treaties ever created and has been used by others as a model. Students at Beaver Brae High School in Kenora were able to hear from the leaders in the Indigenous community, including Grand Council Treaty No. 3 Chief Francis Kavanagh, who says it's imperative students know and understand the region's history.
The real history. For me, growing up, we were called savages and this and that we were always the bad guys, we did massacres and this and that. That was not the case, it was, we welcomed newcomers into the territory. It was us that helped them survive the tough environment.
Students also got to hear from Kenora Rainy River MPP and Minister of Indigenous Affairs, Greg Rickford, who praises the efforts of the Keewatin-Patricia District School Board to work in partnership with Treaty 3.
I just think it's awesome, and a shout out to the school board here for, as I said earlier, making sure that through ceremony, through educational activities, interactive activities, or a combination thereof, to help do our part to celebrate and raise awareness around Treaty Recognition Week.
58% of the student population at Beaver Brae is Indigenous, and Principal Tracy Benoit echoes Kavanagh on the critical nature that Treaty Recognition Week plays.
I know that some kids are going to go to the interactive map. They're going to be asking their teachers about it. And our teachers have a lot of resources this week as well available to implement in their classrooms. So open dialogue and sharing.
Adam Riley, TBT News.
Officials with the Northwestern Health Unit in Kenora say a vaccine shortage in that part of the region is no cause for concern. Manager for Infectious Diseases Donna Stanley says several vaccines for rabies and hepatitis A and B were deemed by the manufacturers as substandard, which led to the shortage. The health unit has enough stock to deal with emergencies, but not for preventive measures such as work and travel. The agency says if residents need the vaccine for non-emergencies, to contact travel health clinics in either Winnipeg or Thunder Bay, which may have had stock prior to the shortage. They can also take other measures to fight the infection.
The big thing we're seeing around here is travelers, so people often get hepatitis A and B for travel, but sometimes people also get rabies if they're going to countries with a lot of rabies. So what we're saying is there's behavioral things that people can do, and those really are the mainstay of prevention. The vaccine is great and we want to promote it, but people can also do things like water precautions when they're traveling to avoid hepatitis A, just for example.
Stanley says the shortages are expected to be resolved in the new year. A new program called Walk or Wheel Thunder Bay was launched this past week thanks to $86,000 in funding from the province and Green Communities Canada. The launch took place at École Grand Morgan, which, along with St. Thomas Aquinas School, were chosen to participate in the project. The schools will work with Walk or Wheel's Municipal Stakeholder Committee to create targeted travel plans that support students walking and biking to school. Spokesperson for Green Communities Canada, Wallace Beaton, says these types of projects have become more necessary for this generation of youth.
In Ontario and across Canada over the last couple of generations, a really sharp decline in the percentage of children that are regularly walking and biking to schools. You have a lot of school zones now that are coping with a lot of traffic, a lot of congestion, a lot of safety concerns, and it's created very unhealthy environments as well for children.
I think it's a good idea because it's really fun to walk with our friends, and it's really fun to walk with our friends, and it's good exercise.
The project is led by a steering committee that includes representatives from both school boards as well as city police. The Wolves had a hard weekend, huh?
Yeah, Carmen, it was a very tough week.